Welcome to the Influential Christian Entrepreneur Podcast, where we uncover the inspiring stories and strategies of successful Christian entrepreneurs. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Rob Fenstermaker. Fenstermaker for you. It must be German, isn't it? Or something like that.
It is very German. It's German.
And Rob is a coach. He is a men's health and empowerment coach. And through his own pain in the corporate world and being laid off and back and forth, he realized that he was going to take a different path. And now Rob is dedicated to empower men to live their life to the fullest as they too create the next great chapter of their life. And Rob is also a kingdom builder. And by that, I mean God's kingdom. So I want to welcome Rob. Thank you for spending some time with us today on this podcast.
Thank you, Francine. I appreciate this. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. And so I guess the first question for me would be, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is? I'm assuming that you, of course, it says you work with men's health. So tell me a little bit more about how you work with men as it relates to their men's health and empowerment.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to say that we men are real good at is we're great at creating a lot of connections that can be a mile wide, but maybe an eighth of an inch deep. And we don't have those really deep connections, and we create this identity around what I like to say our 9 to 5. I've been through a couple opportunities or a couple experiences where that 9 to 5 identity is just yanked out right from underneath you, and you kind of go into life with this illusion that of job security, and that's no. The job market has changed from what it was 40, 50 years ago when our parents and grandparents worked, and they worked at the same place for their entire career, and that day they finally came, got a gold watch and a pat on the back and sent out the door. There's no loyalty anymore in corporate. There's no loyalty, I think the people that are engaged in corporate understand that. And they really struggle with what this identity is, what this identity of what it means to um, be a man when you wrap yourself up around that 9 to 5 identity. And when it gets pulled out from under you, some things just kind of are laid bare. And what I want to empower men to do is to understand that men help men. As the proverb says, iron sharpens iron. We men have to sharpen each other, and we have to rely on each other as a band of brothers to hold each other up and encourage one another. And that's one thing that I have found is tough for a lot of men, is just that willingness to open themselves up. But when you get around other men that are willing to do that, there's something really powerful about that. And I've been involved in different men's groups through my life, men that I could really rely on and trust. And when you have those men in your life, and then life happens, because life is going to happen, it's so refreshing to know that that band of brothers that you have are there to support you.
Yeah. And when you say band of brothers, I always think about military guys for some reason. I see that, or I find that men who were in the military seem to have that band of brothers that they were in service with, or they can always seem to be able to stay in contact. I don't know, maybe I'm making assumptions. That's been my experience around men who have been in the military. But then the men who maybe don't have that, and are more like corporate guys, they don't have anybody. And of course, as a society, it's like, oh, men need to be tough. We need to be supporting everything, but nobody supports you, right? And so, what was your experience in the 9 to 5? What did you used to do for a living? And tell me about your journey through realization that, man, I'm not going to put my eggs in this basket anymore,
Yeah. Yeah, I worked in the insurance industry. I worked for a couple major insurance carriers, just kind of worked on the company side, in more of the operations. And the experience with that is when you're dealing in a business that's very customer centric. You always there's that expectation that, and rightfully so. I'm not disparaging that, but the experience that I always had that it just really kind of impacted me in a lot of ways was that, the expectation was you're going to do more work. You're going to do more work. You just got to do more work because this is, what this is what's expected of you. And, I was well compensated, but there would just be those times and that you would leave the office and I was just burned out and just the expectations kept getting more and more the longer I went in my career, and the burnout stages just kept getting closer and closer together. And I don't want to disparage corporate, but there's also got to be a give and take in a lot of ways. And I think one thing that for me that I, the good that if there's any good that came out of 2020, I think there was some good. There's a lot of good, but one of the things that I saw as a positive is people started to understand that I just can't wrap myself around this 9 to 5 anymore. I've got to live for something else. And I've got to really focus on the things that are important in my life. And I think that paradigm is the paradigm of living for more for the things that bring you joy and bring you pleasure. It's something that's positive. And I think, getting the employee, a little bit of some of the power back in their life is something that's very important. Because when that power is taken away from us and you feel just trapped in this, corporate environment, it's just debilitating. And you feel like, especially for men, the some of the toughest times of the week for a lot of men is Sunday evening because they sit there knowing that Monday's about ready to happen. And if you look at statistics, I mean, there's an epidemic of suicide among men, but the most common time for men to commit suicide is on Sunday evening. And that's scary.
Wow. When they think about, I know that when I used to work for corporate, that was the worst time of the week for me as well.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would be worse for men in a way, in many ways, because for me, in my personal situation, I always knew that I could always quit my job because I had a husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that was my particular, those were my circumstances. I can't speak
Yeah.
for other women. But when you're the man and you're the head of the household, that's definitely
Yeah.
not an option.
And there's a responsibility, with what it means to be a man. That responsibility is you're the leader of the family. You're the
Mm.
protector. The wife is the nurturer, and the husband is the protector. And one and when those areas get a little fuzzy and confused, I think that's where you see a lot of men struggling with this idea of what's it mean to be a man anymore. Because in some circles of our society, let's be honest, the idea of
Hmm.
manhood, that's a dirty word. That's a curse word.
Oh, yeah. Because they
And
attach toxic to it, don't
right,
they?
yes, they do, and absolutely, and you know, there's nothing wrong with just this idea of just men being men, and let me rephrase that: men being men, as long as you're respectful of what you're doing. Men going out and doing men things, that's what we were programmed to be. That's who we are.
Hmm.
We're to go out and do these things where we get dirty and get muddy and get sweaty and get gross. That's when I have some of my most fun in life, when I'm doing that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
when that's the one thing that I really struggle with in corporate is that was kind of taken. And it felt like that was taken away from me. But I always enjoyed, the one of my favorite time of the week always was when I'd go out and do yard work on the weekends because I would get sweaty and gross and there's something to me, there's something powerful about that. And I just always loved that feeling. And because it just told me that, I'm doing something here. I'm doing some work. I'm doing something some hard labor. And, I think that's, what it means to be a man. You do the
Or,
hard stuff.
yeah, part of what it means to be a man. And there's nothing wrong with that because if we look at it from the Christian perspective, men have their role and women
Mhm.
have their role. That's how it used to be in society, right?
Yeah.
Although, there are a bunch of lies out there these days saying that, no, there's no such thing. But, and those those roles have been attacked lately, and I'm wondering if when you work with your clients, are do you mostly work with men who are have the idea of biblical manhood in mind? Are they Christian men, or do you work with men from all walks of life?
I work with men from all walks of life, and my faith is very important to me. And I don't necessarily push my faith. I leave
Mm-hmm.
that up to my client. But every conversation or every time I've engaged with a client, we eventually get into that. I let them go there, and we get into that conversation, and that's part of our foundation. Because one of the things when clients work with me, one of the things I really want them to focus on is the foundation for their life. And what I mean by that is the things that they know to be true, those truths that they have. Because everything we do in life has to rest upon that foundation. All the decisions we make, all the choices we make, everything we do has to rest upon that. And when you're solid on that, you can make those solid decisions. You can make those solid choices. You know, the Bible tells us about the man who built his house on the rock. The storms came and he was able to withstand them. And the man who built his house on the sand, the storms came and it was gone. So when your foundation is on sand, when life happens, you're going to struggle. When your foundation is built on the rock, you're much better to withstand those storms as they come in your life.
Right. And so, do you think that when men have, because you don't bring that into your business necessarily, because we've always been told to not mix business and faith because mixing faith and business is not a good thing, like the separation of state and church. It's not a good thing because you could be offensive to people, or you can alienate some people. And the way I'm understanding that you do it is you don't necessarily bring that up until there's an opportunity for a conversation. But at the same time, I
Yeah.
do see wording on your profile on LinkedIn that I think would be
Oh yeah.
a wink, right?
Yes.
Or something, because
Absolutely.
who uses the word kingdom? Christian
Yeah.
people, right? Am I
Yeah.
right about
Yeah.
that?
You're right. And you know how I came up with that word that is one of the things that I think a lot of people are good at is they build up these walls to keep them safe from the world. And they actually think they're safe, but they're not really safe because they build up these walls to keep out the ugliness of the world, to keep out those things that maybe are painful to them. But here's the problem: when you build those walls to keep that stuff out, you're also keeping out the joy and happiness that a lot of people are missing in life. So let's tear down those walls. Let's break, you built this castle, and a castle is, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
serve you well. So let's break down those walls. Let's build this bridge to get over whatever the obstacles that are holding you back, and let's step into that kingdom that you desire. And that kingdom
Mm-hmm.
to me, well, it also represents it's just this life of significance. Because you get in corporate and you've heard the term the rat race, and you get on that rat race, you get in that rat race, and here's the problem with the rat race is every time you're about ready to cross that finish line, someone moves it on you, and you got to start all over again. It's a never-ending race, and but when you live for significance, that's something that extends beyond who you are. That's you leaving your legacy. That's leaving your mark in life. Because to me, the greatest example of significance is the thief on the cross. Because we don't know much about him other than he was a thief and he was condemned to death to hang on a cross, but he just happened to be hanging on a cross next to Christ. And he must have knew something a little bit about Christ, who he was, because he made a couple comments to Christ as he hung there and died. And those comments he made are something we still talk about 2,000 years later. That's significance. That's you leaving your mark in this world. That's you creating that opportunity to tell the world there's something a little bit different about you. And that to me is what we've given this life for. We've given this life for. Not to just chase success all the time. And we all want to be successful. And I don't have a problem with success. But the only problem I have with success is that it's so fleeting. It's here today and gone tomorrow. And if you don't believe me on that, I mean, I'm a sports person. I love to watch sports. Turn on, the sports channels the day after the Super Bowl, and they're not really talking much about who won the game last night. What they're talking about is who's going to win the game next year. They've already forgotten about last night. They're already looking
After you
forward.
work so hard.
Exactly. Exactly.
After you work so hard and all that time and all the things you sacrifice, success in the world is fleeting, right?
It is.
Um, so in your work that you do with men, what are you mentioned a few of the problems that you have been able to address or talk about with them in whatever container you have set up, which is, you know, the fact that men tend to wrap their identity a lot in
Hmm.
their career, their nine to
Yeah.
five. Another and because of that, there are a series of issues that come with like just and then in addition to that, they don't have any support system. Most men
Yeah.
don't have other men that they can talk to. Um, but do you find that today, beyond the fact that men just can't find a job that will last the rest of their life, so it's pointless to wrap your identity in it, what other issues are men today in the modern day experiencing that you feel isn't brought, it doesn't get nearly as much attention as women can get for um, women's issues, because
Yeah.
I hardly ever hear men complaining about anything.
Yeah. I think the one thing that is true, I know it's true for me and it's true for a lot of other men I've spoken with, that we have these dreams of what we want to accomplish in our life. And, the world needs dreamers. I mean, without dreamers, we'd still be living in caves. So it's dreamers, it's the people that dream are the ones that change, how we engage life to make this world a better place. And that's why we need to dream. And one struggle that I've seen, at least me personally too, that I struggle with was I wasn't living those dreams out that I wanted to. And when I say the word dream, it's just a vision you have of the life you want, the life that you want to create. And that dream that speaks to you is that dream that's going to serve those that you're in contact with, serve your family, serve those that your friends, serve your work associates. And men just need to understand ways to embrace that dream, how to bring clarity to it, how to become that soul on fire again. Let that fire within your soul rage again as you're taking that step to live that dream life and put it into words, because words have meaning. Words are powerful. We put things to words. That's powerful. And put them, you write them down and you speak them. There's a lot of power in that. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He didn't say I have a
Mhm.
plan. He said, "I have a dream." I think of, I have a plan. I just think of sitting in another boring corporate meeting where it's PowerPoint and by death or death by PowerPoint.
Mm.
But dream, that's something that inspires. And when you know your dream, it not only inspires you, it inspires those that that you know about. Martin Luther King, he spoke that dream. It inspired, hundreds of thousands of people. They still met obstacles, but they had their eye on the dream, what that vision was. And that's what men need to get back to, is creating that vision for their life, creating that dream for their life and stepping into that and living it.
Yeah, and I feel like in today's in today's society, I feel like men are almost discouraged from exhibiting, those things that make them men, being a go-getter, being bold, being, aggressive in a good way.
Yeah.
Those traits that make men men are being discouraged. I can only imagine that with all this stuff of male toxicity and how men should just sit back and be quiet, because it's time for woman
Yeah.
to rise to the top. You guys have had a long run. It's time for you to just like go away.
Yeah.
Do you see that getting in real life? Do you see that affecting men, or
Yeah, I
is
think
that
it
just
does.
my
I
idea?
think it does affect men, especially younger men. There's studies I've read that younger men in their 20s and 30s, they're just like, yeah, they've just kind of lost that focus. And you also look at college admissions. I mean, it's some of the studies I've seen. It's over 60% women to men. So men are just saying,
Mm-hmm.
they're not interested in college anymore. And I mean, I went to college, but I don't think I've always believed college is not for everybody. And,
Right.
just forcing everybody, oh, you got to go to college. And I'm like, well, why? We still need plumbers and auto mechanics and
Yeah.
masons and carpenters and, those welders to make this whole thing work. And I think you're seeing, in a lot of ways, I think you're seeing a return to a lot of men understanding that
Uh-huh.
they don't want to be in this corporate rat race. They want to do something with
Yeah.
their hands. They want to do something that creates. They want to do something that
Yeah.
they see make a difference. And I think that's good. I think that's amazing that men are standing up and embracing that. And
Yeah.
I think
It's
that's
almost like counterculture these
it is
days,
it
isn't
is
it?
it
Like
is in a lot of
being
ways.
a man and getting dirty and doing work with your hands is counterculture.
Yeah,
Who had ever thought, right?
yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. And so you would think that that's a good thing that because I think honestly, I tell my own kids now, who would have ever thought I would have said this, but I'm like, listen, unless you're going to medicine or doing something that requires a license,
Yeah,
college is mostly unnecessary, to
it
be
is.
honest,
And in a
these
lot of
days. And
ways,
do not
yeah.
get into any debt,
Yeah,
right?
in a lot of ways, I think there's a real scam with higher education. And
Yeah.
I'm not anti-high. Don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-college, but I think a lot of ways there's a real scam when it comes to higher education, because these 15, 10, 15, 20 years ago, these kids getting out of high school were sold this idea: well, you go to college, you're going to get this dream job. Doesn't matter what your degree is. Get your degree in whatever you want. You're going to get this dream job. That's why you see so many college graduates that are baristas at Starbucks, because they had some worthless degree in art education. And I'm not dissing on art education, but there's only so many
Right.
art educators we need. And if you have everybody getting
Yeah.
that degree because that's the cool thing to do, what are you really getting out of
It
college?
makes us feel better. It makes a lot of people
Yeah,
feel better. I have an education, but in practical terms, it doesn't do anything for you. If anything, against you, because then you've gotten into a world of debt
yeah,
when you could have. I tell my son, you know, don't ever get in debt.
yep,
Go work at as a plumber, electrician. They make plenty of money,
hmm,
and work those 4 years instead
yeah.
of going to college, and you'll have money in the bank,
Yeah, absolutely.
instead of having
Yeah,
debt.
and don't get me started on the student loan debt, because I've heard somebody say, "Oh, you can't go to college without debt," and I'm going to say BS to that. I got through college
Yeah.
without student loan debt. Well, granted, I had to go in the army, and I got the army to pay my way. My wife went through college without student loan debt because she was able to get a
Yep.
full ride academic scholarship. My son right now is in college, and he has his employer paying 100% of his college. So it is possible.
It
These
is
people,
possible.
these people that say that they don't want to do the hard work to find the opportunity that
Yes.
exists there.
Yeah, and it's painful. For me, we saved money for my daughter and my son. So she's gone to a college where she made sure she could fit that into that budget and not go
Yeah,
a penny over, right?
yeah,
So she decided to study local. However, one of her friends went on to California spending, I don't know, by the end of the 4 years, it's going to be, multiple, probably $200,000,
yeah.
UCLA, for a degree in, I can't even tell you, some kind of diversity studies. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, what a scam, because
Well, it is a scam.
you're going to come out and you're going to have to work for a nonprofit that's not going to be able to cover the
No.
expense that you incurred. And so I think it's good that people are starting to wake up. So many things happened, I think, in the past couple of years that had just started waking people up to thinking more practical, and stop having, even when I went to college in the 90s, and back then it was a big thing. Like, you were a loser if you you didn't go to college, right? Back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that things are turning around. So you do
Yeah,
work with younger men as well.
here's the funny thing. When you talk about college, of all the people that I went to college with, there's some that were able to start their own business, but of the people I went to high school with and got a technical degree and learned a skill, almost all of them have their own business.
Exactly. And in today's day that everybody is remote, almost
Yeah,
everybody. Did you know that 165 million people in the past few years came onto the online creator space in the past 3 years? So I mean, that's where people can make money and create their own job, their own
Yeah.
career without having to pay. It will take you, you will pay in terms of time. You
Oh
have to
yeah.
take your time to
You,
learn a
you,
skill,
right.
effort,
You
but
gotta be
it's nothing compared.
you gotta be willing to do the work and whatever you decide to do. If you just want to, show up and do your time and come home and sit on the couch and watch Netflix, well, then you know what, you're kind of living a life that's. But LP Jacks talks about a master in the art of living, where everything they do it with excellence. And if you live a life with living it for excellence, everything you engage in, you're giving it your best effort, regardless of what it is. With your relationships, how you work, whatever you do, when you live a life of excellence, you're being that best version of who you can be. And when you live that life, it just opens up so many doors for you. It helps you understand that there is a grind to life. And I'm not, the term hustle culture, I always hated that term because it connotates to me someone who's just kind of a scammer, almost like a snake oil salesman. But the grind's something different. That's
Yeah.
you're putting the work,
Uh-huh.
you're putting in effort, you're getting up, you know, uh, earlier to just do what you need to do. I love sports, and there was a thing I read about Kobe Bryant that he would routinely show up at the gym at 4 in the morning. Team practice didn't start till like 7:30, 8 o'clock. He'd already got 3 or 4 hours of practice in before the actual practice started
Hmm.
because he was a grinder. And if you know anything about Kobe Bryant, he's well, I
Yeah.
his story was amazing with what he was able to accomplish. But he put in the work. It wasn't luck. He put in the work. People think that people like him are
Hmm.
just lucky. No, he put in the work to to get where he was at. Because
Right.
there's many people that think I can be as good as Kobe Bryant, and there probably
Yeah.
are some people that on a skill level are probably better than him. But where it separated him is he put in
Hmm.
the work. And when you want to be that person you really want to be, you got to put in the work to work on yourself and work on that vision of what you want. And when you do it, it pays rewards. When you really do it with intention, it does pay rewards.
Yes. And so do you hold men, how do men, do you hold a
Yeah, it's
mastermind
one-on-one
or is
coaching.
it
How I
one-on-one
work with my
coaching when you
clients,
work
I
with men?
what I call my Soul on Fire course. It's a 12-week one-on-one course where we work intently for 12 weeks. And because I think that's the best. You just get in it and you start doing it. Because when you take massive
Mm.
action, I hold them accountable. Hold them
And then you
accountable.
hold them
I have different
accountable and that's what
uh,
gets them.
things I do with them. Each week is a different module, and we just continue to build on that. I want them to get clarity around what it is they really want out of life. Put it into words, because once you put it into words, that's the best accountability you have. And when you start speaking it, that's the accountability. Then you really start figuring out this vision you have for your life. Who does it serve best? I mean, who's benefits most? It's just not benefiting you; it's benefiting others. Because when you're going on this journey, it's not really about the destination. It's what happens to you along the destination. It's the roadmap you create. And the thing that's cool about a roadmap, and
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
don't have roadmaps anymore. You look at everything on your phone, but I always used to love when I was, back in the day, looking at atlases. I would just get them, I would look at them. And what's cool about them, when you look at it, it gives you all kinds of different ways to get from point A to point B. There can be the quickest way, there can be the way that routes around traffic, there can be the most scenic way, but they're all going to get you to that destination in a way. And
Hmm.
that's what I've had someone describe to me. That's how I describe the Bible. Actually, it's kind of a roadmap. It's not a rule book. It's a roadmap. There's no one set way for me to get from where I'm at
Yeah.
to the kingdom. Everybody has their own journey. It's who you are along that journey that signifies what you become. And when you create that roadmap for your life, that's what's fun. It's
Right.
the experiences you have along the way. It's just like when you were a little kid, your parents would load you up in the car and take you wherever you were going, to the beach for the week. And it's just those little things you remember along the way, the little stops that you'd have, the
Yeah.
little mom and pop stops where everybody would stop for lunch. It's those little things that you remember
Yeah.
along the way to get to the beach. You remember the beach, but it's just the getting there is some of the
Yeah.
great stories that you have when you're growing up.
Absolutely. And but when you're working with the men who happen to be Christian,
Oh,
do you
absolutely. I mean,
incorporate scripture
I've
into the
read the
coaching?
Bible, from Genesis to Maps too many times, so I know the Bible. I know what the Bible says, and I know what it doesn't say. And when someone's giving me bad theology, I can, like, wait, and that's, getting back to, something that I think is lacking. What I see in a lot of men is just biblical education. You got to know what the Bible says. Biblical literacy, absolutely. You got to know what it
Biblical
says, because I've
literacy.
seen a lot of bad theology out there that people for listening to the wrong people, giving them the wrong messages.
Hmm.
And that's if you know what the Bible actually says, and if you really study the Bible in the perspective of when it was written. I mean, it still applies to us today, but some of the deepest study that I get from the Bible is when I consider it in the perspective of that time when it was written. It just makes it a lot more powerful. And I mean, it's always applicable to where we're at today. And there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that people struggled with, 2, 3,000 years ago, we're still struggling with today.
Right.
We just call ourselves sophisticated because we've given them different names, but it's the same struggles. Same struggles.
Well, and we think we're sophisticated because of that same level of biblical illiteracy. I realize that in myself. So many things that you hear, little buzzwords, because
Yeah.
people will take what they
Twist it.
like
Yeah.
out of scripture and just kind of, like believe in yourself or like all these little things, and or they'll change things around. And part of the reason why we have so much trouble
That's
in
it.
our life is because of biblical
Yeah.
illiteracy. If we only knew that there is nothing new under the sun, and that all
Yeah.
these things that happen to us have happened before, right? And we learned from what happened before. When you and I had we were on our Zoom call, you and I were talking about,
Yeah.
how, who was
Yes.
it? Was it Elijah who had to run away from Jezebel? How she tormented him. Um, and I thought about how men today are being
Yeah.
kind of cast away or
Yeah.
trying to shove them into a closet so like just be quiet. And in the context of what happened to Elijah, you're the one who brought that. I mean, you actually
Yeah.
clarified
And
that
the
for
story,
me.
the story
That
of Elijah,
there's
he had
nothing new
just
under the sun.
accomplished
It's
something
happened
great.
before.
He had taken on the 420 priests of Baal and showed that, who the true God
Mm-hmm.
was. And so he had this great victory, and Jezebel was after him, and he
Mm-hmm.
just freaked out. He was stressed out. He was tired. He didn't know what to do. So he ran away
Mm-hmm.
and he hid in a cave and he asked for guidance from God. And so there was a fire that came. He didn't hear God in the fire. There was an earthquake that came. Didn't hear God in that. But there was a gentle breeze, and he just paused and listened. That's where he heard the word of God. That's where God spoke to him. Even the devil, the enemy, knows Scripture. When Christ was tempted, he was tempted with Scripture, but he kind of twisted those words a little bit. The enemy doesn't have just enough truth to make you wonder.
Yeah,
The
enough
enemy
truth
doesn't
to
have a
make you
problem with just
wonder.
reading the Bible. Another one of my favorite characters is a man named Eleazar. He is one of David's mighty men. And what we learn about Eleazar is that he stood in a field of lentils and fought Philistines and slew 600 Philistines in this battle. And he swung his sword so hard that his hand froze to the sword. In the book of Ephesians, we learn about the armor of God. Every implement in the armor of God is a defensive weapon except one, and that's the sword of the truth. So back in the day, if you took somebody prisoner during those times, you wanted to, or you captured somebody on the battlefield, you wanted to be a prisoner, there were two things you had to do. You had to chop off their big toes so they couldn't run away, and you had to chop off their thumbs so they could no longer hold a sword. So see, the enemy has no problem with us reading the Bible. He just wants to remove our thumbs so we can't grasp onto it. So we need to be strong in who we are. We need to be strong and resolute and
Mm-hmm.
understand what is in that,
Absolutely.
what the word says, and take our stand.
Yeah, and And that's why we need to be in the Word, because I find that so many Christians, part of the reason why they are afraid of openly expressing their faith outside of church or home, in
Yeah.
business, is because of biblical illiteracy. And it has nothing to do with, oh, I can't quote scripture, or if somebody tells me something, I wouldn't know how to answer or reply, because I don't know how to do that. Okay. And it comes with time. It's not that, it's that because we are biblically illiterate, we don't know what God told us to do, which was
Yeah.
to go everywhere and tell the good news to every creature. Right. And so, if you don't
One
know
of the most
what the Bible
empowering things to
says, you
do, if
can
someone
be
asks me a
easily
question
deceived,
about the Bible and I
is
know
what
the
I'm trying
answer,
to get at.
I just say, I don't know. Let me find out and I'll get back with you. Don't make something up. Because I've been asked those questions. Sometimes I don't know. I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let me look. Let me figure it out. Get back with you. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, people do make stuff up. That's true. Absolutely. So, yeah, for sure. Don't be afraid. And so, Rob,
Yes.
how is
Yes.
it that
Yes.
men,
I
you are
am.
most active on LinkedIn, right? I believe, correct? Yes. And so, how is it that men that would be interested in talking to you or finding you, following you about how you
I
can
do have
help
a
them?
website. I do have a website.
They
It's just
contact you? Do you have a website
robfenstermaker.com.
that can go check
You
out?
can also email me direct at rob@robfenstermaker.com. Or if I need to mention I'm on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, just connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll jump on my calendar. And I'd love to have a conversation with them, and just kind of explore, what it is they're looking for, kind of explore with them the opportunities they want out of life, and what it is they really hope to get. That's the best way. Is just jump on my calendar and let's have a conversation.
And now,
Yes.
I've been wanting to
I
ask you
do.
this.
That's just
Do you
something I
do
started
whiskey
kind
on
of on a
Fridays with
whim.
your clients?
It was over, gosh, my wife and I, we moved to Florida in March of 22, and we lived up in Ohio. And so before we moved, it was just one of these, it was a Friday. I had to get a haircut. And so I'm sitting there in the barber I was going to, he'd always give me a glass of whiskey. I'm like, all right, all right. And so I just happened to take a picture of me drinking it and just kind of, posted it online, and it just kind of took off. A lot of people were saying, you need to do this virtually. I'm like, all right. So we started doing it virtually, and it's just an opportunity to bring people together. And there's actually women that show up to this as well. And we just talk about different things, so we're kind of around manhood, just, leadership, a
Oh,
lot,
really?
what's it mean to be a man. We've had some great conversations. We've had some of those messages, conversations just been a little silly, but for the most part, I just try and keep the conversation focused on something surrounding this idea of manhood, what it means to be a man, and we just do it while we're just sipping a glass of whiskey. That's it. No, no, it's a
And
virtual
so,
event. It's a
is
Zoom
that an
event,
audio event on
and so I'm
LinkedIn?
holding it this Friday. So if anybody's, just log on, and it's just an opportunity to
Okay,
just connect with other people. It's every other Friday. It's just a little bit of it's a kind of a networking event, just an
every
opportunity
Friday,
to
right?
bring people together to just close out the week and just share.
Vent and share, and you can find that if anyone is interested. You can just go
Yes,
on Rob's LinkedIn profile, and he posts that every week. So
yes, that is
I'm
true.
sure in there they
Any
have
call,
you have a link to go on the Zoom
the
call,
call to
and
just
it's
get with me
free,
is a
correct?
complimentary call, and just gives you the opportunity to, one, for me to learn a little about you, and give me to learn you to learn a little bit about me, and just how I work. And yes, so yeah, it's complimentary, and there's great value in it, and it's just my way to give back.
Perfect. So there you
Fenster
heard it,
maker.
guys.
Yes.
Rob Fenstermaker. Fenstermaker. You can find him on LinkedIn. That's where he's pretty active. Check out his
Yeah.
whiskey event on
And you know what,
Fridays if you just
you
want
don't need to
to
show you don't
spend
need to show
some
up
time with
drinking
other
whiskey.
men
Some
and
people
vent
just
or
don't.
just share
So
what's going on in the week.
there's no requirement to drink whiskey. So that's just the
Yeah.
name, just the
Nobody's going to know
dedicate
or
to it.
care.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
just the name of it, but it is appealing. Friday night to
Well,
unwind a little bit.
that's the thing. And
Yeah,
I've
because just
actually
because
had
you're
some
Christian doesn't
people
mean
call
you
me
can't
out
have
on that,
whiskey.
and I just challenge them. I know my limit. I'm not getting drunk. The Bible doesn't say you can't drink. It just says don't get drunk, and but don't get inebriated. Yes, and
Yeah,
I will
inebriated. That's
remind
a
them that
different thing.
even Jesus drank
Drinking and
wine.
getting drunk are two different things. For sure. You can abuse anything.
Yes. No.
For sure. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rob, for being here and spending some time with us on the Influential Christian Entrepreneur Podcast. Your insights and the way
Yeah.
that you view things, I'm sure will connect with some people. That's what I love about doing the podcast, because every guest is going to have a different way of saying things
Yes.
and viewing the world that is going to stick with somebody. You never know, right? What's going to resonate with someone. And I want to thank all of the listeners today for being here and listening to another episode of this podcast. If you're a Christian CEO or executive seeking to authentically integrate your faith and professional brand on LinkedIn to inspire others, further God's kingdom, and leave a legacy, let's connect. You can find me at francineSinclair.com or hello@Francine Sinclair. And I want to invite you to come back next Tuesday for another episode with another amazing guest to talk about mixing faith and business. So don't miss out next week, next Tuesday. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.